It's my pleasure and honor to, introduce the distinguished resource speakers for today. We have three of them, so I'm going to read through each one. So the first one, we have Dr. Pavel Zubkov. He is an assistant professor of the Applied Theology Department of the Adventist International Institute of Advanced Studies, Philippines. He teaches applied theology research and writing and serves as a seminary methodologist. Among his recent presentations are qualitative research projects entitled Faith Experience of African Students in Secular Universities in Russia, a narrative inquiry, and Apostle Paul's writings through the eyes of Muslim background believers, a case study. He is also the Chief Operating Officer of AQRA. Dr. Arceli Rosario is a professor and chair of the Education Department of the Graduate School of the Adventist International Institute of Advanced Studies in Silang, Cavite, Philippines. She teaches courses in educational administration, TESOL, and qualitative research. She also conducts trainings in qualitative research and has published studies using qualitative methodologies. Her research interests include women leadership, educational administration, empowerment of women, conversion, retention, and reclamation of church members. She is the current president of the AQRA. Dr. Safary wa-mbaleka, he is the director of Adventist University of Africa Online. He is an author of several qualitative research books and articles, which you can access at www.myresearchcorner.com. He has delivered keynote and plenary presentations at several international conferences in more than 20 countries, including once at the World Conference on Qualitative Research in Porto, Portugal. He has provided several dozens of qualitative research trainings and talks over the past 7 years, mainly in the Philippines and a few times in other countries. He is the founding president of the AQRA. Ladies and gentlemen, we now present the most distinguished resource speakers for their presentation.
Thank you very much, Carol. The first to present is Dr. Safary, followed by Dr. Pavel, and then myself. After that, we will have question and answer. So now we give the time to Dr. Safary.
Well, greetings everyone. Greetings from the Adventist University of Africa, located here in Nairobi, Kenya. It is about 12:12. It's just lunchtime here at this time. This is a pleasant surprise from my president, Dr. Arceli. I thought I was speaking the last one, but I guess I will go ahead and speak at this time. It is a great honor for us to be speaking with you. I see more than 300, almost 400 people who are on this platform. I consider it a great privilege for me to be invited by the AQRA leadership team to join in this interesting conversation and discussion that we're going to have. The reason why we decided to talk about this specific topic, which is conducting quality research in online modalities, is that, as we know, there is a lot going on with the pandemic right now, that it doesn't matter where you are in the world. We have to collect data using alternative means, because in many places the pandemic has prevented people from collecting data from the traditional ways of talking to people and observing them in a natural setting. And so I have been asked specifically to talk about online in-depth interview. I apologize. I was hoping there would be an introduction to introduce all the three. I will leave that to somebody else to work on that. But I have been assigned to talk about the online in-depth interview. Some of you may recall, those who have been attending our colloquium for some time, that I actually had another presentation on in-depth interview. That was, I think, last year or a year and a half ago. Yeah, maybe a year and a half ago, where I talked about in-depth interview, had one whole session on that. And this time I was requested to talk about how to do that online. I'm no expert in this, although I have done some of it, but it's exciting. So what is it? Let's define it first of all. What is online in-depth interview? Some will call it e-interview or internet-mediated interview, or this is the in-depth interview conducted using information and communication technology. So that's the bottom line that we are going to use as the definition of what we're going to talk about in the next 15 minutes. So let's look at the importance. How important, what is the importance that we find with the online in-depth interviews? Number one, interviewing is probably the most common form of data collection, according to Miriam and Tisdale. And this is because the interviews provide rich data. As you know, and this is one of the things I talk about in one of my books, that when you may ask people to write papers, many people will not actually want to do that. But when you try to ask them to talk, everybody has something to say. It is easy to get people to talk than asking them to write long papers or publish papers. And you get to have direct interaction with people when you interview them, meaning you get a lot more information when you are conducting interviews. Because of the social distancing now, the efficient and cost-effective, the most flexible way of collecting a lot of data is through online in-depth interviews. We don't have to go and interview people face-to-face because that would be breaking the health guidelines. Now we can just do that online, and that will save us time. We don't have to travel long distances. We don't have to spend too much money on the transportation, for example, or hotels if we are interviewing in other countries. And this can give even more flexibility where you can interview people at their own time. We have now a lot of technology that is available for interviewing. And so we can use this technology, just like the one we're using right now. We have people, as we heard in the introduction, we heard that people are joining from South Africa, and I'm sure from Kenya, and I know some joining from Haiti, and heard even Mexico and the Philippines, and I saw somebody greeting us from Myanmar. So now we can actually collect data through interview without using the technology that we have. And also when we're dealing with sensitive issues and complex issues, sometimes people may feel much more comfortable communicating with us online than doing it face-to-face in the same room. So what are the different types of interview, online in-depth interviews? Just like the regular ones, the traditional ones, we have structured, semi-structured, and unstructured interviews. This is knowledge that's very well known by now. And when we go specifically to the ICT, to the technology, we have synchronous and asynchronous interviews. Synchronous interviews being those that we do live. For example, if we have a teleconference, interviewing live the person, either through Zoom or other means like that, where it is live, or asynchronous interviews where we send questions to people and they type their answers and they return them to us. The other thing with the asynchronous interviews that I've seen done, some of my students did this, was to create a forum discussion where people can actually post their answers there. And so the researcher is there monitoring what is happening, knowing that not everybody is going to post at the same time. How to prepare for online in-depth interviews? we can ask the following questions. What is the reason for using online instead of face-to-face interviews? We need to have a good reason for that, because we know that when we have face-to-face interviews in a physical setting, we may get a lot more non-verbal cues that we wouldn't have gotten, or even the contextual cues that wouldn't have gotten with online. So we need to have a good reason why we want to do it online. What will I do to ensure trustworthiness online? We don't just throw the trustworthiness out of the window because it's online. What technology will I need? And do I need videos or audios and or text? And why? We don't just say, okay, I'm going to use text because that's what I want to do. It has to have a good reason, something that will contribute to the study. Is the selected technology user-friendly for yourself and for the participants? Because you may come up with something that is so complicated that it will become a challenge also for the participants or for yourself. Is it secure? And is it affordable if it is something that you have to purchase? While conducting an online interview, in-depth interview, you need to consider the following. And I'm just synthesizing some of these things. The article that we are going to publish from this will have a lot more details than what we have here. So we need to have interview protocol, just like what we do in face-to-face interviews. We need to have that interview protocol validated, just like we do in face-to-face. We need to select the needed ICT tool. Why did I put it after this? It's because the kind of interview protocol will decide the ICT that we want to have. We need to recruit and select the participants. We need to give them, and on this one, of course, we need to have the selection criteria clearly outlined and how we're going to select them. We need to invite them, to recruit them. We need to give them, we need to ask informed consent. By default, it's written, by sometimes it can be oral, depending on the context of the participants. We need to schedule the interview and then conduct the actual in-depth interview online. We have the follow-up interview. And while we do all this, we need to make sure we do it within the best practices of ethics, of research ethics. We are accountable, whether we are in face-to-face or in online settings, we are accountable to the best practices of ethical research. And so all these things, we keep them in mind and we observe these practices when we are preparing or we're conducting our in-depth interviews. But this comes with some challenges. As you can imagine, we can expect technical issues. And this is the reason why we need to try to find something that is really user-friendly. And if you are living in a place where electricity is not stable, that is something that you may want to think about very seriously, because if the electricity is gone and the computer dies within 5 minutes, or your internet connection depends on the generator that you're running, then these are things that you have to consider very seriously. Limited technology access for the participants. Maybe they don't have the kind of technology you're asking them. Right now, many of us use Google Meet and Zoom. We have become probably kind of experts, but it doesn't mean that everybody we want everybody that we want to interview will have the same access of the technology that we are using. We may have technology distraction where maybe the notifications that are coming up on the phone and the things like that, somebody calls and it is ringing. These may also lead to challenges. Limited nonverbal cues, because we are looking only at the little screen that is in front of us. Confidentiality challenge may arise, so we need to have a plan how we are going to keep the data confidential so that nobody will easily access the recording that we have, for example, and people are not going to hack into our meeting. limited data with asynchronous interviews. I have used asynchronous interviews where I sent a list of interviews to people. I did this a lot in the Philippines. Sometimes it was because I wanted too many people included, and other times it was because some participants just didn't want to talk. They wanted to write their answers. And so sometimes you'll find that a question that would have generated maybe 10 paragraphs, it will generate 1 paragraph because the person, the interviewee, is just trying to give the minimum because they're having to type everything. There can be challenges with the rapport building process. You know, with face-to-face, we have that direct contact interaction with people. But with the online, especially with people that you don't know, that rapport building might actually be a challenge. In ending this, I want to end with the final practical strategies. I have, I think, 3 minutes to go. We need to be culturally sensitive when we are conducting online interviews. We need to consider power dimensions so that we understand if somebody doesn't want to talk about something, maybe it's because they are afraid of the power relationship that exists between them and you, or between them and their supervisors that may be involved in the study. We need to build rapport, and this might take a little bit more challenge than in face-to-face again, but we need to come up with strategies to build rapport, maybe creating more interaction way before the day of the interview through emails or chat, so that the people can start becoming comfortable with us. We need to have clear listening skills that will allow us to understand fully, deeply what people are saying. We need to develop online interview skills. We need to have the ICT usage skills. Whatever platform we want to use, we need to know how to use it well. We need to adjust the interview guide whenever it is necessary, and anybody who has conducted interviews will know that things will not always run exactly the way we had planned them. We need to prepare for dealing with emotional issues when that arises, and this is true for face-to-face and online interviews as well. And the last one, I want to encourage us to have an ICT plan B. If ever the plan I'm working on doesn't work, what am I going to do? That is something that we have to keep in mind, because trust me, technology will always fail when we least expect that. In the conclusion of this specific section of this presentation, I just want to say the bottom line is to have a good preparation. Good preparation of your content, that's through your interview protocol, your interviewing skills. If you have never conducted an interview, please read about that. We have quite a lot of articles written on that. Some of you have my books. I have sections on that, how the different skills and strategies that you can use. And also, you need to prepare well for your technology. Make sure that it's user-friendly. Make sure you know how to use it. Make sure that the participants also know how to use it. So with that, thank you so much. I will give this back to our president, Dr. Arceli.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Safary. So the first presentation is how do we do in-depth interview online? The next is by Dr. Pavel, and this is how do you do focus group discussion online? And we encourage you continue to ask questions, type them in the Q&A box. Dr. Pavel.
Okay. Second, I'll just scroll down this one. Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm happy to present with you this study. And as I continue after Dr. Safary, I would like to also mention that the researcher's life is not on pause. We are still continuing. and we are learning new skills to approach our data by different modes, different modalities, different ways. And so focus group is one of the most um, popular and frequently used methods of data collection in qualitative research. Group interview provides, if individual interview is more focused on depth, group interview is on breadth. If it gives you a breadth of ideas and unique features that you may not find available when you interview people face to face, just on one-to-one basis. Well, we understand that how it works in a regular face-to-face modality, but when it goes online, there are different challenges and features, and I should say advantages and disadvantages. And so I would like to share with you, first of all, what is the uniqueness of online focus group discussion. And first of all, well, if we compare it to a regular face-to-face interaction, it surpasses geographical and temporal limitations. It gives us the opportunity to connect with people from different sides of the world. You can have greater recruiting opportunities because it's much easier for people to connect. And I remember we just did our recent study with my student. We had the focus group from London, from the UK, and otherwise I could not imagine going there and conducting this. So this is a new opportunity, definitely to reach more people, more participants, to get richer data. It can be acquired, data can be acquired in different forms and venues. It is more diverse now because it comes as text, as voice, or video. It appears to be even more effective in discussing sensitive topics online rather than face-to-face. People feel more relaxed, more at ease. Another feature I wanted to share with you is that people can share not only the information, but some artifacts. They can easily share their screen, and you can see their documents, their pictures, whatever they have and they want to provide as a supplementary material for their interview. That is also your richness of your data. And I like that because you have this artifact with you, and you can easily include it in your report later on in your data analysis. It provides higher level of anonymity because it is less threatening and more relaxed atmosphere. And I feel it even myself. Well, I may have some as a researcher, I'm more, I should say, I'm prepared, but I'm worrying how it will go. But still, when you do it online, it is easier even for the researcher if you are prepared well. The participants do not see your notes. Well, we need to be prepared. We want to be prepared. So when I conducted my focus group interview online, I had all my prompts around the screen, and nobody could see them, but I can easily go there and I can see, okay, now this is a question to ask, and I can do also my notes, and it is less formalized. Well, there are challenges. It is more difficult to manage, especially manage some technicalities, as Dr. Safary already mentioned, especially the classing process of turn taking. You need to be conscious of who is speaking and who did not speak yet. It requires certain level of computer literacy, yes, and the researcher role and moderator's role is more crucial. We'll talk more about it. Online focus group enables the researcher to gain a deeper perspective about the degree and quality of interaction, engagement, and nonverbal activity among participants. as I already showed you the picture that people can share more than just information. Um, Although we cannot see their, sometimes we can have limited view of them, just to their face, and sometimes video is not working. But when it is well designed, well prepared, you can have more information and activity among participants. There are basically two types of online focus group, as it the same with the individual interview. It is synchronous and asynchronous. Well, there are pros and cons for each of them. And synchronous is a real-time interaction, and asynchronous allows time lag between the responses, which gives more flexibility to your participants. Synchronous is based on text, voice, or video. True, it is also including text, because what we can do, you can chat. And this chat will be just typing your answers. But in that case, the typing skills are important. It is required that people should type somewhat in, the typing skills should be adequate and equally shared among the participants. Well, it is also a video audio conference versus an online forum, a group chat, or other interactive platform. Sometimes asynchronous method is called bulletin boards, when people can leave their comments and they can comment on other comments. The more constraints involved in synchronous and less for the asynchronous, because people are posting independently of each other. While with synchronous, it is spontaneous discussion. With asynchronous, it is the answers are more thought through. People think before they post. And it also allows the researcher to go back to what people post and ask more questions on what they post. Although in the synchronous modality, people are more conversationally based interviews. So they may have more spontaneous ideas, more spontaneous talks, which is also advantages. And finally, in the synchronous way, you have to transcribe your data, but in asynchronous way, it is already transcribed for you. So you will save a little bit of your time. Well, maybe sometimes it's much time for data transcription. Still, both of them are useful, so we can use both of them. What are the requirements for successful focus group, online focus group? There are several important things that I wanted to mention here. First of all, it is technical skills and equipment. At least a medium level of technical proficiency is expected from the online focus group participants, and some technical requirements such as computer or laptop and microphone and webcam. For the logistical requirements, we may think of what platform to use for video conferencing. It may be Zoom, it may be Skype or GoToMeeting, and there are many other platforms. And I like the table I wanted to show here. This is a comparative table from a recent article by Loeb and others. And this is just the comparison of different platforms, how they work and what they provide. You may be referred to that article for that information. Also, we need to think of devices. Sometimes it is a smartphone or a laptop or a desktop, and it should have good internet connection, of course. And there are logistical requirements. Continuing for logistical, it is quiet venue. Sometimes you can hear the voice overhead, and there are some, glitches and some interferences. you need to provide, to ask the participants to provide a safe and quiet venue for the interview. So the prior communication is urgent and actually critical. We need to send them the rules and check their sound and video quality before we start the interview. So a short pre-session is advisable to have. Maybe it can be done just before the interview. And also it is limiting the number of participants. The more participants we have, the more challenging it gets. So the researchers come with this ideal number of 3 to 5 participants at most in an online focus group. I tried it myself. I tried with 4, with 5, and I should say this is just enough. We cannot really manage more. It will be challenging to manage more, especially when people use smartphones and they cannot see all the participants at the same time, or their faces will be very, very little. And a researcher's role is also very critical in an online focus group. It is more demanding, as I said already, as compared to face-to-face interaction. It requires certain skills to set and manage the conversation. So the researcher role is very important. I like this idea of rigid flexibility, as was introduced by our good friend and partner researcher Anna Cohen-Miller in her recent article, which means then maintaining a clear and unwavering goal in research with a willingness to be flexible in how it is reached. This is, friends, this is really a point of success or a failure. The researcher role is very important. As we are prepared for the conversation, for the discussion, and we also allow some flexibility, but we still hold it within the venue of our research. So in online, it is in online modality is very important, the researcher's role. The interaction also, it is connected to a researcher's role. How much do we allow people to speak? Some of them may speak more, some may speak less. And it is good in the online, we can see the names that are assigned in the profile, so it makes it easier for us to call the name. Okay, now, Steven, it is time for you to talk. What do you think, Peter? We have a few minutes left. This is our focus group that we conducted online recently. There are some ethical considerations to think of in the online focus group. First of all, it is more difficult in online modality to differentiate between public and private space in internet. So we need to be very careful with that. What is private and what is public? In informed consent, we may send it by email in advance and make it sign, or they may just respond to our email, and that will be already a consent. Otherwise, we may read it aloud before the interview begins, and an oral agreement would be recorded and be served as a basis for the consent. Withdrawal is even easier online. We can just ask the participants if somebody wants to withdraw, then they will just leave the discussion. Privacy, anonymity, and confidentiality is more difficult to maintain in online than compared to face-to-face modality. We need to have password-provided, password-based access to the session so that others will not intrude and have the access to that conversation. The other thing is that sometimes family members can be around. As I said, it should be, the venue should be safe. Nobody would be close to them. And they may also hear the conversation. We need to prevent any linkage between participant and email address. private home background is also recorded, we need to consider that it may be intrusion into a private life. In some country laws, it is really prohibited. We need to be careful with that. So the solution may be a virtual background. So we may assist our participants to install the virtual background before the beginning of the conference. The participants can possibly record the session on their devices, even though we may announce that this is confidential and nobody should handle this information except for the researcher, but we cannot guarantee. So it is the best to do a disclaimer before that we cannot guarantee anonymity and confidentiality as it goes beyond the researcher's capability to control. And finally, data storage. We need to keep it safe. The data should be safe, and we may prefer the local storage over the cloud, as it is more vulnerable for hacking sometimes. Different countries may have different additional safety, ethical safety measures, so we need to be conscious about that. So we have a conclusion here. I have already exceeded my time. An online focus group provides a valuable opportunity to still reach participants and collect meaningful data in the era of social distancing. We need to be encouraged to continue to collect data even in this new reality. It offers a safer way to express and discuss personal experience. To facilitate an effective focus group online, it is highly advisable to give ample time for prior communication with the participants to secure technical and other areas to be prepared in advance. And although seemingly challenging, then online focus group is worth trying. So I would encourage everyone to try it online. Thank you so much. I'm stopping sharing.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Pavel, and we are happy to learn how to do focus group discussion online. Our next topic is this is how do we collect arts-based data online. For some of us, arts-based data may be quite new, so I will spend some time explaining what it is and give examples, and then I will proceed to how it is collected. So in the 21st century, in qualitative research, researchers have tried to explore other methodologies, specifically on how to identify research problems, what kind of data to collect, and also how to represent data, how to report data. And one of these sources of data, or shall we say method that is explored, is arts-based research, sometimes called creative research. There are three categories of arts-based research. These are art in research, art as research, and research about art. What we are talking today is art in research. So in this presentation, when I say arts-based research, I am referring to art in research. So what is art in research? It is a research method or dissemination technique. There is an active involvement of the researchers in the process of art making and or guiding of research participants in the artistic research process. So art is used in research as a data. There are several types, and different authors have classified these. Some have classified these into three, such as literary, for example, poetry, novel. Of course, there are other forms. Performative or performance, such as dance, theater, music. The other is visual, such as photos, collage, painting, drawing, and other forms. Knowles and Cole, they wrote a book actually Handbook of Arts in Qualitative Research, they added two more. So they also include literary, performance, and visual, but they added new media, which can include blogs, radio, video, and also folk art and popular art forms such as quilts and others. So there are five popular categories. There may be more, but these are the most popular ones. There is another term, aesthetic portrayal. This term is introduced by Lawrence Lightfoot and Davis, and this is an encompassing term. When we instruct our participants to use aesthetic portrayal, we are asking them to represent their realities through artistic expressions. When we say aesthetic portrayal, our participants can do different kinds. They can maybe write a poem, take pictures, make videos, maybe tell us the metaphor of the phenomenon, do a collage, a drawing, or other sensorial expressions. So what do we mean specifically by data or art as data in research? It is the description or explanation of the art that is used as data rather than art itself. When I talk about this, my students or some in the audience usually ask, now, what if the participant will say, I'm sorry, but I am not a good artist. I cannot draw, I cannot paint, I cannot write a poem, I cannot sing a song or write a song. So what do we do? Actually, it's not about the art. It is the meaning of the art. That's the data that we take. So the art is helps facilitate the data. So the art captures the realities. The explanation or the meaning of the art is the one that we use as data. So the focus is the narrative or the description behind the art and not the art itself. I am giving you here some examples of studies that used arts-based data just to show to you that it is possible. For example, Bisco in 2020, he used aesthetic portrayals and his participants, one did a collage, another did a drawing, one did a painting, one did photos, one in fact made handmade chocolates. His design was narrative inquiry and participants were elementary and high school teachers. Rosario and Obo did a study on graduate student mothers about their realities. This was a portraiture. And again, we instructed our participants to do aesthetic portrayal. And one of them did, actually two did a poetry, one did a painting, one did photos, one wrote a song and sang the song. There's a meta-analysis of 116 articles using arts-based data, and the participants of all these articles were children from 7 to 12 years old, and the participants did drawings, photographs, graphics, and artifacts. Another meta-study, these are health, in the area of health, 72 articles, and the participants did photos, theater, drawing, film, video, poetry, dance. And because this was in this meta-analysis study was focused on health studies, some of the participants were patients. Green and Denov did a study on children and youth affected by war, and the participants did masks and also drawing. Cohen-Miller, as Dr. Pavel mentioned, she's an AQRA member, and she shared with us her study, A Transcendental Phenomenology. She wrote an article saying that drawings can be a source of data for transcendental phenomenology. She did a study with graduate student mothers whom she called as doc mamas. So from this study, we can see that it is possible to gather data from any kind of participants. In fact, arts-based data is a good data collection method for marginalized people, those who do not have a voice, those who may not have facility with language, those who feel that they are discriminated and oppressed and are not used to talking people, especially to researchers. Okay, so I'm showing here to you that handmade chocolates in the study of Edgar Besco. So this is an example of an aesthetic portrayal where there is a piece of art and then there is a description. Now maybe you will ask, like, what is the meaning of that? According to Edgar, his participant who was a teacher, he was studying on professional identities of teachers, told him, now you have something from me in you. This is what I want for my students. I want them to take something from me, something that will be useful for the rest of their lives. And the participant actually gave this box of chocolates to Edgar and asked him to eat this one. Okay, another one is an example of an aesthetic portrayal from our study titled The Portrait of a Superwoman. One of our participants did a painting. You will see that this is actually a woman, and then she described this picture or this painting through a poem, and there's a poem here on the left side. One of the studies of Dr. Anna Cohen-Miller about doc mamas, which I mentioned earlier, this is a drawing from one of her participants. So there's the drawing, and there are brief notes here about what the drawing is about. Another one is in the same study, we did what we call as found poetry. Found poetry is the researchers take a word or words. These are usually the dominant words or dominant phrases from the different transcripts, can be from the interview transcript, can be from shall we say, in-depth interview. In our case, we got these from the transcripts of our in-depth interviews. And these are the recurring words and phrases. And then we put them together in a poem. So this is called found poetry. In this case, the data is generated because this poem is from the transcripts of the interviews. So now we proceed to how do we collect arts-based data online? Many principles that were shared by Dr. Safary and Dr. Pavel here, and what I will share with you are overlapping, but I will discuss some that are unique. And number one here is, for your research team, decide on a platform. And I suggest here it can be Basecamp or Moodle. There are many that you will use to send announcements, upload reading materials, set schedule, keep notes, etc. This is for the research team. We are saying research team because in qualitative research, we want to emphasize that it is always good to do your research as a team. So have a platform for your research team. So this one is an example. This is Basecamp, and you will see here, this is our a research study that is ongoing that I'm doing with some colleagues from different parts of the world. And I'm happy that Dr. Janina Petri is here joining us now, and she's one of those. This is on institutional narratives, and we are covering 6 universities, one from each continent. And so we are using this because we research team members are coming from different parts of the world and we cannot talk. So we converse through online and we have this kind of platform, and we find that this one is appropriate for us. The other one is choose a platform where your participants can upload their data, for example, photos, journals, paintings, drawing, poems, recordings, etc., and where you can upload your instructions, schedules, reminders, etc. But we are reminding here that you should observe participant and data privacy. So in our case, we are using Moodle. Why we use Moodle? Because there is a feature where we can post for everybody to see, but there is also a feature where the others cannot see the other participants cannot see what one participant, for example, has posted, but only the researchers can see. So in this way, we are addressing the concern for data privacy and confidentiality. And you will see here, we are specifying drop boxes for different types of data. Like here, we have different sources of data. So one drop box for one data source. The third here is that decide on what platforms to use for your virtual meetings with your research team and with your participants. You can use various modalities, and we suggest that you use like emails, mobile phones, WhatsApp, Messenger. Dr. Safary mentioned about have a plan B. And your plan B can be, for example, you are doing Zoom and all of a sudden one participant is lost or one research team member is lost. Then you have emails, then you have mobile phones, then you have WhatsApp, you have Messenger. That means that your concern can be addressed. Provide training to the research team and to the participants how to navigate through the different platforms that you are using. And we suggest that these platforms should be easy to learn and even easy to access. One of the data collection methods is taking pictures, then provide the participants training on photography, such as how to take pictures, what ethical issues to consider, and what permissions to secure. In arts-based data online collection online, we suggest that at the start of the study, you conduct a virtual meeting with the research team and all the participants. That is, if your study is community participatory research where it is okay for everybody to know each other. But if your participants' identity must not be known to other participants, for example, you are dealing with sensitive topics, for example, you are doing transcendental phenomenology or hermeneutic phenomenology, and you want to hide the identity of your participants, they must not know each other, then that virtual meeting should be held with every participant. And during this meeting, you can discuss about the purpose of the study, expectations from the participants, duration of the study, schedules, platforms, how the data will be used, and consent forms. Aside from the written conversations that will happen through a selected online platform, why written conversations? Because you can also set up between you and your participants where they can share interpretation of their arts. But aside from that, there should be regular virtual meetings with each participant or group of participants. Also provide participants clear instructions such as prompts or questions they are to focus on when creating their art. Discuss with your participants during your virtual meeting, and also upload the instructions in the online platform in written form, and also audio and video recordings to address different needs of your participants. Some may prefer to read, some may prefer to see you giving the participants or hear you giving the instructions. Here are examples. This one, I got this from the article of Dr. Cohen Miller on how to give instructions for drawing in a transcendental phenomenology study. You will see here that she used Seidman's phenomenological interview framework, where there are 3 phases. And as you see here, for each phase, there is an instruction. So for each phase, there is one drawing. For phase 1, there is one drawing. Phase 2, that is interview 2, another drawing. In phase 3 or interview 3, another drawing. So 3 drawings all in all. But the instructions, you know, here is so clear. As I said, you can explain this virtually and also post this one to the online platform. Another one example here is the instructions for an aesthetic portrayal, which again is very clear. And next, set an appropriate amount of time for each activity. When I say each activity, because when you are doing arts-based data, you do not engage them only once, but several times. So provide schedules for each activity and also how long, and make the schedule known to your participants and also send them reminders. This one is the last. Follow up with interviews or focus group discussions, and you can use the guidelines given to you by Dr. Safary and Dr. Pavel to understand the meanings or outcomes that came from the process of creating the art. So you can ask questions. And here I would like to share with you what are the challenges. Some challenges are common. One of these is the lack of the researcher's bodily presence. Why is it very important in arts-based data collection? The reason for that is because you do not engage with your participants only once. You engage with them for several times and for like a long period of time. Some of these can last for 1 month, 2 months, and even more. So one solution here is that if you can find a research assistant that is physically accessible to your participants, meaning they live where your participants are. And this is what we are doing in the study that I mentioned earlier. So one participant, one of our team members is very close to, accessible to one set of participants, okay? So the other one is participants' lack of competence in technology, and we say provide training virtually, upload one-on-one video, give one-on-one tutorials, upload video tutorials, and again, if there is a research assistant. Participants have no device or no internet connection. As you see, I mentioned earlier that when you do arts-based research, one of the purposes is to give a platform for marginalized groups of people. And so if they are disadvantaged because they do not have the device, they cannot afford to buy one, and they do not have internet connection, by all means, we have to address this. Why? Because we want to give them a voice. We want to include them in research so they can be heard. So I am drawing from what Wang and Boris in the early 1990s did when they introduced the photo voice study. You know, when they started this, pioneered the photo voice study, at that time, people did not have access to cameras, and photos were the main source of data in their study. You know what they did? They provided cameras to their participants. This collecting data online actually is not really new, but this was initially done with quantitative research, but with qualitative research, the practice, although this has been introduced some years ago, it has really pushed researchers to engage in this kind of modality nowadays with our situation. So I would say you may want to consider providing your participants the device and internet connection. Another challenge is this is too time consuming and too engaging. So what we can do is we have to set clear expectations at the start of the study so that those who agree to participate know what they are going into. Although we are aware that we may not be able to fully make it very clear to our participants, or even if we make it clear, our participants may not fully comprehend the expectations we have from them. What we can do then is at periodic times in the study, we have to ask them, and we call this one process consent, whether they want to continue or not. So for our ethical considerations, I want to draw from the ethical concepts proposed by Amdor and Bankert and Brinkman and Kivali. These are respect for persons, principles such as confidentiality, voluntary participation, or informed consent, past process consent, beneficence, like how will our research benefit our participants, especially that we are engaging them for a long time and we are engaging them intensely. And also we ask ourselves, what harm, if ever, will this research do to them? And for the principle of fairness, we want to ensure that no group should be systematically excluded from research that might benefit them. That's why I said that if you can secure funding to provide a device and internet connection so that we can reach the marginalized groups. All right, our concluding thoughts. Qualitative research data can be collected through online modalities, and hence our situation presently should not stop us from engaging in qualitative research and furthering knowledge. And there are strategies that we can employ so that we can do data collection, and that data collection methods through online modalities can be used not only during our time now. Maybe you are saying, oh, I will not engage in that. I will not learn in that because anyway, maybe pandemic will only be 1 year or 2 years, then I can resume. But you know, you can do this in other contexts, such as your participants are separated geographically, or there are political and cultural restrictions, or where conditions are unsafe and you cannot go to the place where your participants are. So this ends our presentation, and now we are ready to answer your questions. Again, we would like to say that we are exploring this and we are not really experts, but we are willing to continue learning with you. So for our questions, I would like to ask the first one that has been voted here, and this one is from Rovelina Hakolbia. What is the merit of in-depth interview against a focus group discussion? Do we get more relevant data if we use in-depth interview? Perhaps we will ask Dr. Safary to answer this question.
Yes, Dr. Arseli, thank you so much, and thank you for your presentation. That was a very well detailed presentation. Yes, I think the person who asked the question definitely has the answer, has shared the answer. And that is indeed with individual in-depth interviews, you get more details. The experts in qualitative research will tell you that when you do focus group discussions, you get 70% of what you'd have gotten from individual interviews. And so if you are really driven by the in-depth exploration, you may want to go with the individual interviews. But if you are much more focused on the diversity of views and making sure you capture that within a short time, then the focus group discussion will be your way to go.
Thank you so much. And perhaps you can also add that we do in-depth interviews with topics that are highly sensitive, and we do not want to the answers of the other participants to be heard. Yes. Here's another question from Dr. Prema. What are some practical ways to create rapport with the participants before the online interviews? I think this can be both for Dr. Pavel and Dr. Safary.
Okay, I think there are some overlap that you may find in building rapport before and after. I saw that this question had had quite a number of support. Let's talk about before. These are some of the things that I just came up with. One of the things that I mentioned was to have a short chat with the participants that you have scheduled for interview. You can have some short chat, just typing. You can ask the participants about their work, their culture, their life, if they are in a place where you don't live. You can address, it is important to address the person with their own name so they understand that you value them. And this is a challenge that I usually have because I'm never very good with the name until I've heard it maybe 5 different times. But if you want to intentionally build that rapport before time, you need to address the person. You can use tactful humor in communicating in the early time. Again, you have to be tactful because humor is cultural. If you belong to different cultures, you need to be much more careful to make sure that the other person will be able to enjoy, to appreciate the humor. The other thing that I'm proposing to have a pre-session before the actual interview, where you may have to deal with the informed consent. You may have informal conversation with the person. Try to even have this informal conversation, something like 5-10 minutes, just short. That is very informal for them to feel comfortable, knowing that, okay, if this is how it is going to be, this person is actually a pleasant person to talk with. He or she's not intimidating. To build that rapport in the pre-session. And some of the strategies that we use also in the actual interviews, like smiling, having eye contact, and greeting the person at the beginning of this pre-session, really showing sincere interest in the person and showing appreciation that you are really grateful that they are willing to participate, and asking questions about the technology you're going to use. Maybe you're going to try that technology just for the 5 minutes of the pre-session, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 days before the actual interview. All these things can help to reduce the anxiety, the stress, the fear that the participants may have. Dr. Pavel, please add some more.
Oh, Dr. Safary, I think it's already, you said everything, you said it all. I do agree with you with this pre-session idea. I tried it also, and it works very well. When you know the participants better and you just interact and exchange some informal facts, where did they work, what do they do, what are the issues, so I think this is very important, what Dr. Safary already mentioned. I would agree with that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I would like to add, you see, I think it is very important that before the interview, we as researchers should have lots of practice. We do practice when we are doing it face-to-face, but I think when we are doing it like virtually, we need practice because for most of us, we are not used to talking alone, right? Dr. Safary, how do you find that the first time you talk to your computer, that you may feel quite strange talking to a person who is not there, who's whose face appears only on screen. So I think you have to practice it with your colleagues or your research team members, okay? So thank you. We have a question.
May I add something, Dr. Arceli?
Yes.
I think that is a good point you have brought up, and that is I had mentioned the need for validation of the instrument. We can use that practice when we are validating. In fact, part of validating the interview protocol is to practice, to see
That's
how
right.
the flow of the interview is going to go. And so that validation process will give an additional area for
That's
practice.
right. That's right. Okay. We have a very interesting question here, and I wonder who among us will answer this question. This is something that we have not covered, but I think this is of great interest to our audience. The question is, what do we do to ensure adherence to ethical practice when we mine data from comments, group chats, and FB posts for textual, discourse, or content analysis? Do we need to secure approval to whom, or we can just collate the data without informing the group about our intent as long as we do not disclose group names or identities? I think we can refer to the presentation of Dr. Namita Roy, if you can still remember, those of you who attended her presentation, that was, I think, in August. We posted we posted her recording, we posted also her PowerPoint. Her presentation was nethnography. And this is the type of research where data comes from the internet. And she mentioned that her study was about food. I remember, what I can remember now is that, Dr. Pavel, kindly help me recall, is that she asked permission from her participants, right? Dr. Pavel, what can you recall now?
I cannot recall, that's the point. But I remember she mentioned that if it is a public group, no permission is needed. If it's only a private chat, then you have to ask the group. But if
Yes,
it is,
so
it's fine.
yeah, so for example, one of you or one of us will do a study about AQRA. And I think one source of data, if we want to study AQRA, is the AQRA FB page. I think we need to ask permission in this case, right?
Yes.
Dr. Safary, Dr. Pavel?
Yes,
Yeah,
Okay.
I think personally, I believe that the standard. This is a question that has come up over and over in many different platforms, and it's always dividing people. Some will tell you that you should, by default, that is the ethical practice. Whenever you collect data from people, you need to get permission from them, especially that if it is if you're dealing with posts where it is accessed only if you have permission to access it. For example, the Facebook group of AQRA, nobody can access that unless you have become part of that platform. There is a procedure for you to become a member there. So for that purpose, somebody doing a study on that needs to ask permission from AQRA at least, and maybe AQRA will decide to have a posting there, flyer to say, well, we have a study that has been approved for this. Same thing with if I have many friends, and because I'm their friends, I have access to their postings. I should really ask permission from them, because if I were not their friends, I was not going to access their postings. If it is something that is in a public domain where I don't need any specific permission to access that, I think that will fit within the public domain where I don't need permission because it's public place. But the moment there is a permission, an authorization for me to access that data, I think we need to have permission.
Thank you so much. I think that's very enlightening. Here's a question for you, Dr. Pavel. What are the limitations of online focus group that may or may not affect the results of the research?
Yes, thank you. This is a very good question. I think I would mention several, but one of the most important limitations actually it depends. It may become a limitation. It may become even an advantage for you. It is your role as a moderator, as a discussion leader, how you will build your discussion online. Because building discussion online is more difficult than you have this, a group spirit when the group is sitting around the table and they all interacting, they are, piggybacking on their ideas, and they share, they contribute, they are more willing to share. In online, you will always have some people who will be, reluctant to share. So you need to, as Dr. Safary mentioned, to call people by name, to make them be involved, and make like turns, like rounds. Okay, this question, who did not answer yet? Everyone should add something. So it depends on your skills as a researcher. Well, another thing is to make people focus. Sometimes they're distracted. It is also difficult online because the children may interfere. There are some other things. We cannot really ensure that people will not get distracted. If it is face to face, we can ensure because we find the place, it's secure, it's just a silent place. But when people are in their houses, how can you do that? So that's something that it still calls for the preparation. We need to prepare the discussion in advance.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. I think we still have like 5 minutes more. Here's a question. How then do you deal with emotional issues? This can be, I think, particularly for in-depth interview. Dr. Safary?
Yes, I think this question came from Dr.
Yeah,
Gabasiani.
Dr. Gabasiani. Yes.
All right. The good thing is that Dr. Gabasiani has a copy of my book, so I have addressed that question there about interviews. Yes, we are required ethically and professionally to have a counselor if we know that, if we expect our study to generate emotional trauma. I know that in developing countries, many times we just depend on a resilience that, people are resilient. After that, they're going to move on. But if we're looking at the ethical aspect of in-depth interview, is we need to prepare a counselor and make the person available so that if there is any emotional stress, that person will rehabilitate the participant who has experienced that. That is the rigor of ethical practices in qualitative research. On the other hand, while you're conducting your in-depth interviews, and I think Dr. Arceli shared this with one of her studies that she conducted with her colleagues in a little bit northern part of the Philippines with the teen mothers, where a participant gets to a level where they start crying that they cannot function anymore. At that point, you need to stop the interview and let the person, kind of get better first. Maybe postpone the rest of the interview for the next day or the next couple of days, and also try to avoid pushing people to address questions if you see that they are questions that are creating emotional trauma, unless they are really the core of the study. And in that case, you need to have a counselor.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Here's a question from Dr. Olano. Art captures the realities through the explanation or narratives. When do we know that we have reached the saturation, or do we have like a limit in the interpretation of art itself. Firstly, I'll answer that last part here. I think when you say, I don't know how to interpret that word limit there, but I want to say that when we interpret art, it is good to have a framework for the interpretation. For example, in photo voice, in interpreting photos, we usually use the showed framework. So there is like, what is S? Like, what do you see in this picture? H, what is happening here? The O, how does this picture relate to our lives? So there is a framework. There are different frameworks. But the one that is commonly used is you simply, for aesthetic portrayal, you simply say, how does this piece of art represent your reality? Sometimes the explanation is one paragraph or two paragraphs. And your question about like saturation, there are research designs that do not really call for saturation. When we are doing grounded theory, yes, we have to chase for saturation because we are after building propositions and theories. But for phenomenology, for example, we can use negative case analysis, like this one participant is unique. Her reality is different from the others, or two of the participants, their realities are different from the others. Okay, let us take, David, maybe we can take one more question here. It's about, oh, here's a question about verbal consent and written consent. Dr. Safary, this is addressed to you. Would you like to explain?
Yes, by default, we use written informed consent because we want to be able to refer to that if there was any issue in the end. But you'll notice that in some cultures, you may find, either because it's a cultural requirement that people respect more the verbal consent than the written consent, or it is a place where people don't know how to write. We are not to push to require them to sign. We can record the verbal informed consent. In this case, we just read what the content of what is in the form and record that and ask them to ask the participant if he or she is in agreement to participate or in agreement with the terms that are in the informed consent content. And if they say yes, then you can proceed with that. Unfortunately, many times when people go to places where people don't know how to write, they just say, oh, we're not going to ask for that. It is very important because it is the ethical thing to do, the best ethical thing to do. And also, if there was any legal issue that arises up later on, you are protected.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. It is time for us to end now, and we are very grateful for your participation.